welcome back, right? So we are already jumping into this conversation, and we're very sure it's going to be a very interesting one. For the past couple weeks, we've been talking about Women's Month and speaking on many different aspects of women within society, from young girls and their perceptions growing up in Belize, to women in the arts, to women in many different facets of society. Today, we have a conversation about the role of men in empowering women. We have joining us the very brave lecturer of the Faculty of Nursing, Allied Health and Social Work at the University of Belize, Fermin Olivera.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
And thank you so much for being here.
Marlene, let's start by bringing to the public the conversation that we began with during the commercial.
Well, I think it's the best way to start. Let's say it.
So, the adage, right? Behind every strong man is a strong woman. But you never really get it the other way around, per se. You've never really heard behind every strong woman is a strong man that is pushing and helping her to achieve either goals or set the pace or what have you. Let's begin with that. What's your take on that?
Do I add in my portion?
I was just going to
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Marlene captured that very well in that behind every strong woman, there is no man at all. And you know, if we look as an example, the political scene where I think women need to make a greater presence at the forefront. Many of the women locally that have gone for elected office usually are not with maybe are single women.
Yes.
Okay. And there's a reason for that. In many circles, women and men, have really become obstacles to the progress of women. So let me say this. I think part of the role of men in really working towards the empowerment of women starts with taking stock of the world we have created that really disenfranchises women, girls, and has made it a place where they are less likely to do well. Not to take away that women in the last 50 years have made great strides in fighting for their improvement in our societies.
Now, I want to ask you very specifically, if we are to tackle the situation of women's empowerment and the movement to have women more empowered, where do we start? There are two areas. Okay. We talk a lot about women in leadership and the example that sets for young girls to be able to believe that they have the potential, the capacity, and the space to take up leadership. But then there is also what I view as the bottom-up approach as to how we are socializing our boys and girls about what their individual roles are based on their gender or their sex.
Right.
So let me ask you, if you were to say where the preferred focus should it be taking place at the same time, or do we need to focus on one more than the other?
Well, let me say this. If we are thinking about empowering women, let's say you take a teenager or at that point where they're adults, the damage has been done. It's very little. That doesn't mean you throw your hands and give up. No, there are many things that we can do, and we can touch on that a little bit. But the true empowerment of women starts when they're girls. As an example, in school or in informal circles with students, I would ask the class, who have children or who are wanting to have children. Is there a preference for a sex, your first child? It has been the norm over my years of teaching and the circles I've been. There is an overwhelming preference for boy children to be the firstborn in that family. Then the next questions would be why? Why is it that we have a preference for boy children and not girls? We start to get into those the socialization that happens, and also the structural elements, inheritance, name. So from the onset, women are in many respects, girls are disenfranchised from the beginning. And it's hard to change that around when they're adults. The damage has been made. So the role of men is to take stock, is to rethink the world we have created, which really has benefited us. And many would say, look at what we have done.
Yeah.
It's time not only to relinquish some of that, but to be more equitable in how we'll share our reality with our partners.
It's
I wanna-
interesting.
Sorry. let me just get one point in. I wanted to point out something. I think very commonly when we talk about women's empowerment, the conversation takes place with women. You know, it is the reality that we seem to feel that if we are to talk about women wanting to empower other women feeling empowered, the message must come from a woman. And I want to talk about that in specifically the role of men. I can point out 2 examples that I'm pretty sure I've said publicly before. The message for Women's Day is never from the leader of the country who's a man.
Right.
It is always, and I made this point when the Women's Commission was here, their booklet heralding women and the work that they do was from the minister, yes, a male, and then the special envoy, who is a female. But we don't have a specific message coming out from the leader of the country acknowledging the role of women.
Right.
We don't see that, and it has never been the case. We see in political parties, when there is an issue related to women, as we saw with the very sexist statements made of a female representative in the House,
yes.
that the statement that came out from that specific party was from a women's caucus
Right.
and not from the leader of that particular institution.
Right.
I say all of these to say that the 2 leaders I'm speaking of are male. And it seems that the work of being able to speak out on women's issues is continuously and consistently relegated to women.
Right.
Why does this, and I am of a very different view, I feel that whoever is the leader should speak out on behalf of women, male or
Absolutely.
female.
Absolutely.
And it goes directly to the issue that we're talking about, that men have a role to play.
Absolutely. Let us think about, I can talk about myself as a father and having a daughter as a youngest child. And then what's the rule? No, I am very cognizant, or I understand very well that I am also a product of that socialization, the patriarchal, the machismo, not only cultural, but that's how I was socialized. That men have clear and distinct roles and functions, and the women would have others. Because of the product of education, having pursued formal education and social work, which really makes you rethink how society functions and the value of people, is that I practice, in a sense, how it can be different with my daughter.
Yeah.
And you blur the lines as to what a girl can and cannot do. And at home there was nothing that my daughter couldn't do, that my sons couldn't do, or that I could do and their mother couldn't do. You have to blur the lines. It starts to expand their horizon, their world. And I think that's where we want to do lots of that individual work. And clearly it transcends with everybody, with everyone else, with the women in your lives. And we want to think, to what extent is that man empowering that woman to reach her dreams, her aspirations, her life goals, as opposed to she's the good helper, she's the one that is doing this for me and those kinds. So it's a reversal of roles in many respects. Partly because you want your daughters to have more equality, more stake in a very real world where really they continue to be marginalized and be victims, if I might want to say that, of structural systems that continue to oppress them, where unfortunately violence is towards them, is an outcome, is an expression of society's reality as to how we treat and deal with women.
I appreciate the fact that you began from childhood in terms of the way we look at gender equality, the roles that males and females play growing up. Like, when you look at the idea that, okay, the female, the little girl, is responsible for doing certain chores, washing the plates, sweeping the house. The boys are responsible for doing the yard work and what have you. When you begin to create those specific lines, it's almost as if you're saying, well, look, there will be no point in time where the woman has to pick up the machete or pick up the rake or go outside and pick up the garbage and what have you. And they grow up with that mentality that certain things are for boys, certain things are for girls. When indeed if you blur the lines, it allows them to understand that the males can do the dishes.
Absolutely.
The women can also help cleaning the yard. It doesn't matter in that sense, but it allows them to have a universal perspective as to how things work.
No, those, Isani and Marlene, those are the very menial, the little changes. But let us, if I can provocatively talk about, what about the enjoyment of human sexuality?
That's right.
As it relates to the sexes, men and women. You know, so there is when we get into things that people really don't even want to think about. There is, I believe that very unrealistically, we have burdened women with high standards of morality that pins them. I mean, all kinds of, they're affected in many ways as a result of that. When men are not subjected to the same standard, you see, and that's what we created.
Yeah.
You know, and that disenfranchised women as well.
And we women also hold other women accountable on those very same standards.
Absolutely.
So a woman is viewed as promiscuous if she has multiple partners,
Right.
or is not engaged in a committed relationship and engages in casual sex. But a man who does so has no label. He's simply a man.
Absolutely, and it's the expectation. So
Yeah.
clearly,
we're
there is
creating a double standard by doing
it is a double standard, and one where women are the ones that pay the higher price. They're disadvantaged. I mean, the level of violence that they experience in, you know, for example, when a relationship finishes, for whatever reasons, if you ask yourself that question, who is the one most positioned to lose? And it's more than not, often it's a woman that is most positioned to lose when those things happen.
Now, where do these ingrained, I would say, values come from and belief systems? Is it, I understand very clearly that we have been raised in an era where we may be able to differentiate how we can make little changes, but it's to be able to empower women on a different level. But a lot of it are such rooted traditions that we don't even realize when we're continuing the very same pattern that we say we want to break out of. So when we talk about the work, for example, you know, I remember being a child and putting up a fight with my principal saying I didn't want to do sewing, I wanted to do woodwork.
Absolutely.
And it didn't work out, but I tried. But we have seen those kind of diminish a bit out of the school system. But these foundations really come from parenting.
They come from parenting, and then what we have learned, for example, and we don't like to admit it, but let me casually state that even many of our religious circles, where we gain a lot of the understanding for context of morality, they really are, when you look at it, by great design or whatever, but very honestly, they are those institutions where men were more positioned to gain from those standards that live. People don't look at that in those ways. But even today we have existing belief systems where it's really for men to lead and them only. We're seeing deviations of that, and I think it's the right kind of direction, and we will continue to see as women become more empowered, as societies become more expansive, we will see more equality in many circles, and many churches today that were traditionally one, we are opening up for women to have better stakes. Why not? They are equal players in this. It's
when you look at leadership and governance, historically it has always been the males who are at the forefront in terms of either leading or in terms of applying leadership, if I may.
Yeah.
You find that now that there has been a gradual shift to where we're more accepting of having women in leadership positions, either from a matriarchal perspective or from a governance perspective. What I find to be interesting is that while it is, let's say, a new world idea, you still have people who buck against that concept, where the woman is in charge, the woman is the boss, the woman is the leader or the guide. Speak to that a bit.
Well, let me put this two ways. men are used to, in a very real practical sense, that women were in charge. At home, I grew up in the home, my mother was the boss. There was no other reality. And of course, my father played a kind of a different role and did different things. But clearly, we grew up. So
they were providers and reinforcement of discipline.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the day-to-day, the love and nurture, care, and all those most meaningful things I learned from my mother. Maybe the best qualities I picked up from my mom, so if you want to think about it that way. But think about governance. The real people that do the donkey work in our electoral political system is women, by far. They are the movers and shakers, yet whenever whichever party comes in, they get little tokens.
Yeah.
And you need to be satisfied with that. And I think women need to be bold enough to go that extra distance where they need to really be assuming those positions. And the true value, I think, in that it's not only the change in perspective, but women will bring other things to the table.
Yeah.
Men with aggression and violence and lots of other almost sense of entitlement. Women will bring a more care and nurturing, a more humanistic affair. Now, there is no point in electing a woman who believes she's a man or needs to be a man. That's not what, that would be defeating the purpose. Understanding that they have had those directions where they have to be able to compete well. But I think it's just the inherent nature of women to come into the free, to come into governance that can really change our societies to make it a better place for everyone. You know, I think it's that male-dominated system of that level of integrity that no one can question. Is just utterly ridiculous. The more power you have and the more authority you have, the more systems there need to be to put you in check. No one should be above scrutiny. That's, you know.
We joked earlier about the strong man being supported by a strong woman, and many times strong women not having a male supportive counterpart. Not all situations.
Not all.
Not all, because there are men who are willing to rise to the occasion and can adapt with times.
Absolutely, yes.
But a part of the challenge, I think that is often assumed when we talk about women empowerment is that an empowered woman means an aggressive woman.
Right.
And assertion does not equal aggression.
Absolutely.
But assertion, as viewed by a woman, is very different from what is typically the case of an assertive man. We don't usually call men assertive in the first place.
Right, it kind of be a downplay if you mention that.
Yeah.
You know.
We don't tell men assert themselves. We do tell women assert themselves. But assertion doesn't mean that I am bombastic and you know.
In your face. And
Yes. So let's talk about how we deconstruct that issue, just in what our view is, or specifically the male view of an empowered woman.
Right. Well, let me that's many questions. Let me see the how whenever you have circles where you have men and women, you can recognize at times women's opinions don't matter much.
Yeah.
Women are interrupted. That's a little sign of the reality of how this happens in the wider circle.
Yeah.
And I must say that it would be of little benefit if women need to transform into being men to be able to be competitive. I think women not only need to rally around themselves, but to recognize that they are treated indifferently in many respects, that the laws that sometimes they support and they're a part of disenfranchise them. You know, it makes it difficult. So it's not that they want to transform into being like us. They need to bring those qualities of nurturing and care, of sensitivity, of humanism. And that's the counter that we need, that will counter aggression, selfishness, greed, and those. Women will bring something else.
Yeah.
You know, and they need to be celebrated for that. They don't need to have the loudest voice or the you know, to be able to compete. They need to bring their femininity. I think the world needs, I think our societies need more femininity into the room. And that's not the same as being sexist or sexuality. The femininity is about the care and nurture. That care that you have in the home, that's what you need to bring into Parliament.
Yeah.
And that is what needs to start to be respected.
Now, Fermin, there are women listening right now and saying, what? You want me to be soft? You want me to be motherly? You want me... This is what I may be working against as an empowered woman. This is what I feel is too often the typecast that is placed on women, why we can't take leadership. How do you respond to that?
Well, and you know, they're the best ones that honestly could say how that would make them feel. Now, I would be very mistaken to say I know what it means to feel like a woman or to be treated like a woman, and I would in no wise think, well, I would have that answer. But I think from a male, I recognize the value and the virtue that women can bring and what they have done. It's just for them to go that extra step wherever they are, that their voices must be heard. Let's take something, for example, in a situation of separation and divorce. Why is it so difficult? Or domestic violence or violence against women. Why is it that we can't have serious and good legislation that completely, that really protect women? Let me give you an example, Isani and Marlene. Maybe it's a year or so ago, a woman in the process of being sexually assaulted, raped, decided, listen, you will rape me, use a condom. When that went to our courts, she was found as being consenting to that, and the man went scot-free. A rapist is a rapist. That's how I see. It's a system that has failed to see. I felt personally this was a remarkably strength woman just to be punished by a naive and backward way of thinking, to even believe that by her saying use a condom since you will rape me means consent. Well, that's a complete
well, there's an even more recent case of a downgrading of a murder charge to manslaughter because of what is deemed to be provocation.
There have been 2 cases recently.
What is deemed to be provocation because of activities that the woman may or may not have been engaging in at that time. Now, I may not be old enough to remember, but I cannot recall of any case where it has been viewed the other way around, especially in a society where we know men are not only they're not the only people who are who cheat, but they're very often excused for cheating.
Yeah. Well, the penalties for women, I think it has been established in good credible research, clearly not here in Belize, that the sentences against a partner where a woman kills her husband or male is more severe, often more. And Nora Param would probably be one of those examples.
The only woman who's been executed.
You know, and I put that in a, respectfully, unfortunately, regrettably. Yeah, and I had to ask myself, because I heard that on the news where it was downgraded. Well, where is that woman's voice? Where is she to be able to? How can she make her voice be heard about provocation? I want to just categorically state that there's no reason for anybody to kill their partner. I mean, that's just should never be. Now,
but this goes back to the morality issue that you spoke of earlier.
Absolutely. To the morality, to the sense of entitlement, to the sense of ownership, and that disenfranchises women. You are nothing more than one more possession that is mine, to keep and to do as I please. And when it doesn't work out, then you can be punished this way.
And if I break out of that stereotypical role, then I am somehow in the wrong as a woman.
And what is the other side to that? You know how many people are stuck in toxic relationships because of one not being sufficiently empowered enough to go and to recognize and to realize that I do a better life and that I'm entitled to a better life and I don't have to put up with this thing. And they remain that way. Whilst women have come a long way, I mean, I think there's those extra steps that would really put them at par. I mean, and those extra steps can be a way in the distance,
Yeah.
But clearly, we would be better off in a society where women are more empowered and more entitled.
So let's go back to our main issue that we're talking about, which is the role of men. And I'm going to dissect it for the different roles that men have throughout the course of life. Let's start with fathers. What is the role of fathers in being able to encourage their young girls to become empowered women?
To give them, to make them be more entitled in the home. For example, that their views are respected, that their roles are expanded, not only to the domestic servitude, caring, all that is fine, but that's the others can also be expanded to them, that they can do other things. And the same is true for the boys in the home. You see, you cannot do one without the next. Because the boys in the homes will be modeling what goes on. They also need to be respectful of the spaces of their sisters and, those kinds of things. And there must be a sense of equality of voice, and of course in the larger context, allow your daughters and your sons to participate in the same kinds of activities, sporting or otherwise. Now that's harder institutionally because there's inequality of recreation for boys and for girls. We need to create those, but in the home you start by blurring the lines that makes one or the other. Instead, children with real potential for good.
So we talked about the role as a father, and I want to expand that nuclear family to talk about how does a husband, in the way he treats his wife and other women in the family, also set the example for the kids and everyone else about encouraging empowerment of women.
Well, the fundamentals, supporting women to reach their goals and their aspirations. What's the use of being in a relationship or being in a relationship with anyone that does not support your aspirations for self-actualization, for your own happiness? And now clearly sometimes these roads lead to places of the unknown, but that's where we need to go. And I am not for one to even suggest that every relationship is meant to last forever. That's a myth in thinking, but it needs to be one. When you are in a relationship with that person, you must be it must be in such a form where you complement and support each other for both people to grow and develop. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point in you always being behind a man that is a strong man? And it should be equality. Equal. If he prospers, you prosper. And if you prosper, then he should prosper as well. Otherwise, why stuck in something where you're seeing that light just going away from you?
I touched on that issue of parenting and the relationship as well amongst parents, because if I were a man and I were encouraging my daughter to explore what all possibilities lie ahead for her, if I still maintain her mother as the housekeeper and cook and caretaker of the home, then which will have more influence?
And let me well, usually the modeling has a very key role very early in life. But let me be honest with you, Marlene. Many, and maybe it's changing. You are not a product of the person you will be a partner with, or that you will. They come. That package comes. But clearly, in that relationship, there are things that you want. I think if I think about my mom, she never wanted to be anything else. She never thought about it. That's all she knew. No, that doesn't mean that my woman or my children, my daughter, needs to be that same way. It doesn't need to be that way. But yes, those things are taught. We will still need to care for children. Women we need to be partners in providing for children. But I think we have limited that role. Central to our failure not to want to participate in the empowering of women is dealing with our own insecurities as males. So
insecurities like
our insecurities, for example, if you think about say virginity as a concept, man's affinity with virginity, if you think about that, it's really a reflection of his insecurity. And the fears of having an empowered woman is how will this end up hurting me, if you think. It's about a possession. It's being insecure from beginning to end. So how we know to deal with it is control, oppression, marginalization.
So continuing with the role of men in the wider society.
Well, if you think about the number of women that are in the workplace, more than at any other time, gainfully employed, I mean, there was a time when women stayed at home, cared. That has changed, and it will continue to change. Men, we can't make it on one salary, so to speak. Many women have to hit and they are not like accusing men, well, you can't maintain me or anything like that. But women are working and will continue to work. It's important for the institutional systems, for the workplace, to really create those enabling environments, if you think, for women to continue to do child during pregnancy, their leave, and child rearing. That by great design, that's how it is. The more institutionally we help women deal with the affairs of their children, they're still mothers, they may be still nursing. We need to, the more we do that, the healthier our societies will be and our families will be. Unfortunately, we lag behind, not only in that, but in many other areas to really help women continue in those productive years to be there for their children. I think, well, the thinking is telling us, that's what we need to do. We don't do sufficient. Women have to run back to work, shuttling milk or whatever. There's really that crucial time for a mother and a child to bond, and for men to play a role during those critical years.
And the last point, the role of men in women empowerment in leadership.
I think as we get to that age, we need to be encouraged and to bring in younger women to be willing to step aside to favor them and move away from this body system where you'll bring and bring your family and friends who are also male, who think like you. Really, there's no change there. And I think about leadership. I mean, people brag and celebrate stuff, and I about their being in political leadership, and their constituents, my God, couldn't be poor. How do you brag about any achievements there? I think we need to step aside and bring some women in and be supportive of them, respectful of them, and we may get some changes.
Okay. Well, Fermin, we just touched the surface on this issue, but I think it is an important conversation to have. We can't talk women's empowerment with just other women, and as you pointed out, in many instances, the men have a role to play as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here. We're going to go ahead and take that final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up, so stay tuned.